This week, the car file opens on one of the biggest selling cars in the country, the Ford Focus. But before we put the technology into focus, here's a little history lesson.
Back in 1968, Ford launched the Escort, and over the next 31 years it was to become the most successful Ford car sold ever, and that means even outselling the legendary Model T. Over the years it's been built in America, in Belgium, in Germany, in Spain, and of course in Britain. And in the UK it's become the country's best-selling car every year since 1982. Why has it been so popular? Well, because the appeal of the Escort has been truly universal. Even though it was a bestseller, Escort soon endeared itself to the nation. I had a neighbour who bought a new Mark I and called it her little sewing machine. Mark I predictably evolved into Mark II, a little squarer, a bit more upright, and inside a bit more refined. But did it lose some of that Coke bottle character of the Mark I? Well, probably it did. But that didn't stop the love affair. With Mark III came a revolution. The front wheels started pulling Escorts along rather than the back wheels pushing them. And the car got bigger too, with Ford's sights firmly settled on Volkswagen's hugely successful Golf. Mark IV came and went with little more than a raised eyebrow of surprise, but then came the Mark V, bigger, softer, and a huge marketing campaign from Ford to convince us that this was the Escort we'd always promised ourselves. Oh yeah? Demand for Escort, especially from fleet customers, is still strong. We're going to see this car around for many years to come.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I be the first to introduce to you the newest addition to the Ford range, the Ford Focus.
Angling to upset the VW Golf Cart, this ultra-modern looking vehicle, which takes many of its styling cues from its big brothers Car, Puma and Cougar, is ready to make Escort Man re-evaluate what he wants from a car. Or is it?
When we started off on the Focus program, we researched with our customers and our potential customers what they wanted out of a car. And they clearly told us they wanted a car that was a new, fresh look, that stood out in the crowd, that was distinctive and appealing to them. And the Ford Focus design is that, it's all of that. It's not a Me Too design, it's very much a fresh new look for this class of car.
Probably the most striking aspect of the new Focus is, of course, its looks. It's a car that you either love or hate. There's very little middle ground, and personally, I like it. It blows the staid Astra and Golf out of the water with its style, which Ford call New Edge design. It has a flowing form with crisp edges, sharp intersections and these taut lines, and of course these distinctive new headlights at the front. It's the rear of the car though that has caused most discussion, with many people feeling there's something not quite right. The flowing lines don't quite flow. The Focus is longer and wider than the Escort, and that's meant so much more room inside the cabin. Even rear seat passengers won't feel as cramped. On the downside though is perhaps the boot, which, whilst adequate, you'd think would quickly fill up whilst loading for a long summer holiday. But what about the dear old Escort, much loved by the great British public? Well, the Escort has a history that's rich and varied. A car that's been around for 30 years, seen man land on the moon, disco fever, and Brazil win the World Cup only twice. My first recollection of the Escort is in the days of Z-cars on television, and that was the typical panda car driven at the time. But the Escort has been at the top of the bestseller lists right through its life. It's been a car for the people of the world, with over 4.5 million sold in Britain and 20 million sold worldwide. We just seem to love it. It's a touch mysterious why so much, because it's never been a particularly great car. In its time, the Escort has had tremendous success in motorsport and rallying in particular. And of course, there have been the usual hot versions, the Mexico, the RS Turbo, and the very potent Escort Cosworth. Well, if you still want to rush out and buy an Escort, you can, because production continues until 2000. After that, though, it's farewell. This really is a great car to drive, and everyone who's driven it will tell you much the same. Now, Ford claim that the Focus has class-leading ride, steering, stability, handling and refinement, and I, for one, am not going to argue with that. We've already seen how good the Puma and Cougar are, and the Focus just seems to continue that line and push the boundaries even further. The Focus comes with a wide range of engines and body styles. Engines are 1.4, 1.6, 1.8 and 2-litre petrol, plus a new 1.8-litre Endura direct injection turbo diesel. Probably the most fun will be had in the 130 brake horsepower 2-litre 16-valve engine, which at the moment is the fastest and most powerful, 125 miles per hour and 0 to 60 in just over 9 seconds. Body styles, well, take your pick. 3-door, 5-door, 4-door and an estate, all with that distinctive new edge styling. Trim styles are varied too, CL, Z-Tech, LX and the top of the range gear versions. So, most importantly, you want to know how the new Focus drives. Is it a match for the benchmark Golf or the superb handling Astra? Well, yes, it definitely is. This model is the 1.6-litre Z-Tech SE engine, which produces 100 brake horsepower. 0 to 60 comes round in about 11.5 seconds onto a top speed of 115 miles per hour. Acceleration is swift, flicking fairly easily through the gearbox. There's a little notchiness going into third, and you can rev it easily round to about 6,000 RPM. It's a really refined and smooth engine. The interior is excellent. It's got superb trim and quality plastic and finishes. Plus, most of what you see here is actually recyclable, so it's great for the environment. The controls are nicely laid out and easily at hand. This triangular binnacle here houses the radio and ventilation controls, plus some rather nifty storage areas and a nice ashtray.
Basically, we started with 3 design themes. One was what we called tube, which basically was a tube that ran across the inside of the vehicle. And just had a very simple shape running across the inside of the car. The second theme was something that was called wave, and basically had a shape that kind of waved like a sort of wave across the front of the car, inside the car. And the T-bar basically had this strong triangular shape that in effect runs from the centre console out towards into the door trim, giving a very strong dramatic design theme, allowing also to take the dashboard away from the driver and away from the passenger, again optimising and maximising the interior spaciousness.
Well, when we did our early customer research, one message that came across very loud and clear from our whole range of customers was they wanted a car that was spacious and roomy and wasn't compromised in any way over the accommodation that it offers. Focus is obviously primarily a family car, and it needs to offer the spaciousness that families need. How we set about this was first very innovative for us. We looked at the overall package dimensions of typical cars in this class, and we decided we needed to take a fresh approach. We raised the roof of the car to provide improved headroom. We sit the occupants a little bit higher in the car to provide improved visibility, and we also sit them a little bit more upright. But we also stretched the wheelbase by something like 90 millimetres compared with the Ford Escort in order to provide interior spaciousness that's unrivaled in this class. And in fact, we believe that we've got interior spaciousness that you wouldn't normally find in a car of this class, but in fact in a car that's one class larger than the Focus.
What we've tried to do is to maximise the interior space in the vehicle by what we loosely termed shrink wrapping the interior onto the vehicle. So by using clever design themes and also taking the parts as close to the sheet metal, the interior of the car's structure, by taking the parts back, we've tried to maximise the interior space and make the car feel and seem as big as possible, and also achieve a best-in-class package.
There are many aspects of the car that make it stand out from its competitors. I think one of the most important aspects is the rear suspension. For the first time, we're offering a multi-link, fully independent rear suspension that offers superior levels of driving dynamics and refinement and comfort, which we haven't seen in this class of car before.
Safety is obviously a major concern to us all, and Ford certainly haven't skimped here.
The Focus has a full range of safety features, as you'd expect for a car that is going to be used predominantly by families. We have, of course, lap and diagonal seat belts in all seating positions, in all 5 seating positions, including the rear passenger centre position. We also have passenger and driver side airbags as standard fitments on the Focus. And we have side airbags available. For the first time, a head and chest bag that provides superior protection in the event of a side impact. But of course the Focus is about safe design, and the whole vehicle has been designed for very, very high levels of active safety, that is controllability and the ability to avoid an accident. And the body structure has been designed such that it provides a very, very strong rigid passenger cell around the occupants of the car, but also crushable front and rear and now side impact zones that absorb the energy of an accident and provide maximum protection against occupant injury.
Ford claim lots of class-leading capabilities for the Focus, some of which remain to be tested. However, it does have superb fuel economy. On the combined calculation, the 1.4 will do 43 to the gallon, the 1.6 41, and the new diesel an amazing 56 miles to the gallon.
Obviously the environment is extremely important to our customers and to ourselves. And we've, for example, for exhaust emissions, we've provided a vehicle that meets all the current and future emissions legislation within Europe. To give you an example, it would take 60 Focuses today to produce the same amount of exhaust emissions as one Ford Escort did in 1977. So in the space of something like 20 years, we've reduced our pollution into the atmosphere by a factor of 60. The overall Focus vehicle is about 85% recyclable. That is, we can use 85% by weight of the materials in the Focus and use them again. And we also pay attention to the amount of time it takes to remove the material to be recycled, because that adds to the economics of the recycling process. And for example, 50% of the plastics in the Focus can be removed within 30 minutes for recycling purposes, and all parts are marked with the material composition and their recycling instructions. But in addition to that, we've used recyclates in the design and the manufacture of the Ford Focus. For example, we use chopped up blue jeans, which we turn into a fibrous material that then we manufacture into sound absorption material that we put in the various parts of the Focus body. Also, we use plastic bottle tops, the more typical soft drinks bottle tops, and we recycle those and use them to manufacture things like heater casings and battery boxes.
It's not just in the details that the Focus stands out from the crowd, not just in the strikingly styled headlamp or the rather oddly styled rear windows, or even the triangular side repeater. It's the whole car, and it was undeniably quite a bold move on the part of Ford to introduce something so striking to replace its ubiquitous Escort. And all a very far cry, you might think, from the original Escort when it first arrived on the scene decades ago.
At first, it was good, very good. The Mark I Escort was light, durable, rugged, and with those Coca-Cola bottle good looks, really very attractive. It was also reasonably priced and subsequently very, very popular. Then came the Mark II, a little more boxy, perhaps a little more modern, but probably not as good looking, and it didn't meet with an immediate and positive response. Then came Mark III, another change, and gradually through the next marks and generations, the Escort was watered down until the disastrous Mark IV. Probably the only thing that could keep this car selling was the little blue oval on the radiator grille and the confidence that that instilled in the car buyer.
And so they gave us this, the Focus, with its unique form that integrates straight lines and curves, pretty much unlike anything else on the road before it. Now those looks may be a bit love it or hate it, but whether you do love it or hate it, there is no denying that the Ford Focus is a very good car, for a lot of reasons. For a start, there's the interior where that mix of curves and straight lines has been carried through, and we get this dashboard, which is, well, striking again. To me, it looks rather as though somebody has taken all the required parts, the dials, the vents, the switches, and thrown them violently at the dash, and they've exploded out from behind the steering wheel. Fortunately, though, they've all landed in pretty much the right places, and everything comes to hand as and when you need it. And the plastics used seem to be of pretty decent quality. It doesn't feel like budget, low-rent, cheap car by any means. My only complaint, well, for a modern car in an era when we're supposed to be light and bright, it does feel rather gloomy in here. And then there's the drive, which is very good, and that's thanks largely to the multi-link rear suspension. It has the equivalent of giving it independent rear suspension, and the reason that's good is it means the suspension itself can get on with doing what it's supposed to do, which is keep the tyres in contact with the road for as long as possible, simply because each wheel is independent and doesn't interfere with the next if it's bumped or jolted. The result is a great drive. It feels extremely predictable, very much planted on the road. And that drive is helped again by the driving position, which is, again, very, very good. Even the size of the wheel, it feels grippable and malleable and about the right sort of dimension. And in the right place. There's enough visibility from here. I'm comfortable, I'm in control and on top of the car. As a place to be, it's not at all bad. There's the usual amount of hatchback type space. If you need a bit more and of a different kind, well, there is a saloon version that's being made, though whether or not you can forgive its, shall we say, quirky looks is up for debate. If you need more space than that, then there is an estate version, a proper load lugger, which again is probably not as interesting to look at as the hatch, maybe a bit more traditionally styled. In common with a lot of manufacturers, Ford were hoping to exploit the platform of their medium hatch contender by making even another version, this time a small MPV. Unfortunately, they got caught up in the debate as to whether to have 5 or 7 seats, and we've ended up with, well, none, because they haven't made it at all. We won't see that for another few years. As for engines, well, if you're after a thumping great V8 job, you're buying the wrong kind of car. If you want something that does the job, it's economical and ranges from a good frugal diesel to the really quite sporty Z-Tech, then you're in the right kind of place. Of course, as soon as you come to a nice twisty A-road, you can start to enjoy that clever rear suspension. If you've got one of the Z-Tech engines, the whole thing feels quite surprisingly sporty. Okay, so it was pretty brave of Ford to replace that most bog standard of cars, the Escort, with something as radical as the Focus. Whether or not, though, the Focus will go on to see as many generations and incarnations as the Escort remains to be seen. Will there be another Focus? Watch this space. In the meantime, well, I think I'll stick to my Escort replacements driven the same way as the original ones, by the wheels at the back, if you see what I mean. Personally, I'd rather be in Essex in the rain anyway. I'm in Dunton at Ford's Small and Medium Vehicle Centre, and this is the real birthplace of Focus. This is the mileage accumulation facility, clocking up the kind of miles any rep would be absolutely terrified by. It's all aimed at punishing the catalyser and all the emissions components. And the kind of miles, well, we're talking 50,000 miles in about 4 months. And the really interesting thing is the drivers. They're all robots. Here is our driver. It runs on a 24-hour cycle and it's completely repeatable. That means it can do exactly the same thing time and time again, which is very important if you're going to be analysing and comparing the results one vehicle to another. It doesn't have a name, but I'm going to call it George. Kind of looks like a George. Okay, take it away.
Okay, Richard.
And my mate George has control over the throttle, the gear change and the clutch to simulate real-life driving situations. In fact, he can even simulate really good or really bad drivers.
with the ability to control the temperature between -40 and +90 degrees and to control humidity from 5 to 95%, this room is all about simulating pretty much every climatic condition imaginable. The car is then set up on the jig next to me and set shaking, rattling and rolling to see what happens to the different materials under the different conditions and whether they result in any irritating squeaks and rattles. I know that in my case, I'm starting to rattle. Apparently, you can get these things in yellow as well. And we've got the same degree of climatic control in this room, but in here it's set to a warm and sunny day with a slight breeze, which is very pleasant. But in here things become just a little more focused, if you'll excuse the pun. The table to my left is actually a mast table, a multi-axis shaker table. It can move through all 6 planes and simulate real road scenarios. And on it, the various controls can be operated remotely. So, we can move the glove box and we can move the ashtray. The idea being to assess their sound for quality. Does it sound good under different climatic conditions? That was a good one. I don't like that one. That was quality. I'm not sure about that. This is an 8-channel fixed body test rig. Basically hell on earth for suspension. It simulates every angle of force impacted on the suspension, including the torque of the brakes. And it can inflict 150,000 miles worth of abuse in 5 days. This is not the kind of thing you want to get your tie caught in.